Hey y'all, it's Michael. Welcome to the Frisco Community Church Sermons Podcast, where we explore teachings from the Bible and learn how they apply to our daily lives. No matter your past, background, or where you are in your faith journey, you're welcome at FCC, and I hope the following message helps you draw closer to Jesus. I'm curious, has anybody seen The Odyssey yet? $1.4 billion. All right. Okay, only a few. I'm surprised how few. Anyone 70 millimeter IMAX? Come on. Yeah, that was nuts, wasn't it? That was so worth it. Oh my gosh, that was so good. So, okay, is anyone familiar with it? Are they familiar with the story that hasn't seen it? Okay, because I'm just curious, does anyone have a favorite character in The Odyssey? Favorite character? Anyone? No one? You like the sirens. It says a lot about you. It says a lot about you. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else in the story? Okay. I absolutely love Telemachus. He was my favorite. I think Tom Holland did an incredible job portraying the role. And what was neat, what I love, is I just tend to love characters like this, where you see him early on kind of aimless, right? He's he's the heir to the throne. Look, by the way, this story is almost 3,000 years old. If I'm ruining it for you, it's on you, not on me. Maybe your English teacher, right? I had to read it in high school. I assume everybody else did. But he's the heir to the throne, and he's just sitting there kind of listlessly, almost aimlessly, and maybe even passively, right? But then something happens. There's an awakening moment where the goddess Athena appears to him in disguise and was like, you've got to go on your own journey. You've got to go do this. You've got to go find your dad, Odysseus, and go out on your own odyssey, so to speak. And while he is out there after this awakening, there's this spark that happens. And when he returns home, he is stepping into, unapologetically, this leadership role, this identity that he has always had, but he's been somewhat reluctant to step into. And Telemachus is great because he is the archetype. He's the original archetype for this type of character in Western literature and Western storytelling and film, right? It's because of this character in Homer's The Odyssey that we have people like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, the rightful king who would not take the throne or who was reluctant to. Or Anna from Frozen 2, who steps into being the queen of Arendelle, not really knowing what was going on. Again, a little aimless, a little drift. There was a spark that gave her this awakening. Similar also to one of my all-time favorite heroines, Katniss Everdeen. Yes, who again was kind of aimless. She was just in survival mode, and it took her a while to step into her role as the Mockingjay and bringing order and freedom back to Panem. And then if you want to take a little bit of a darker turn, one of my favorite movie characters, flawed though he may be, of course, is Michael Corleone, who was very reluctant, did not want to step into the role as the Don, as the Godfather, but did. And we see with all of these characters, we see with every single one of them, this kind of detachment at the beginning, or an aimlessness, or a lack of purpose. But then, of course, there is this spark, an inciting event that leads to this awakening where they have this realization of who they can be and need to step into. And then usually some kind of reluctance, and then they step in and they unapologetically are making offers that people can't refuse, right? And so that is what these characters are. It's one of the things I love about Telemachus. And I think that these are powerful narratives because they're relatable. I think all of us have experienced something like this in life. We can identify with these characters because at some point in life, we've all been kind of on the sideline waiting to step into something. And a lot of times it requires this spark where there's an awakening. And it can be a family member, an aunt or an uncle, or a parent seeing something in you, a skill that you have, an ability that you have, and telling you, speaking that truth into you, I see this in you. Maybe a supervisor at work saying, I actually see a clear growth track or career opportunity for you, career path. I remember when I was in college, early college, waiting tables at Chili's. My GM pulled me aside. I was like 19, maybe 20 years old. I think I was 19. He pulled me aside and he's like, Michael, you have what it takes to be a GM. You could be a GM at Chili's by the age of 25. And I was like, okay, I don't know that restaurant management is the life for me. I've been in the restaurant industry, service industry for a while, but thank you. I appreciate that. And it did mean something to me. It was incredibly meaningful to me that he saw that in me at such a young man. Maybe some of us have had mentors, right? Who say to you, you are sitting on the sidelines and there's so much more. They challenge us and call us into something bigger, something scarier than we ever dreamed of, than we ever dreamed possible. And what they do is push us a little bit. They prod us. And it is scary. And it is big. And it causes a reluctance for us to step in sometimes. But it's also incredibly liberating, right? Any of you who have experienced this, and some of you may be on this right now. You may be in a moment in your life right now where maybe it's a time of transition. Maybe you don't know that it's a time of transition where you are being prodded, maybe even pulled into something bigger than you anticipated, something scarier than you anticipated, something that there's no chance you can do it on your own. But just like with all these characters who unapologetically step into their identity, into their role, into their responsibility, it is incredibly liberating to be like, hey, this is who I am. This is my purpose. This is my mission. Gives us that sense of identity, purpose, and mission. And it feels so good. It feels so good to be seen like that by somebody and to be stepped into. And so when I think about that, and I think about, we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. It's like, man, I've been thinking a lot about Frisco Community Church. What has the last 5 years been like? What are the next 5 years going to look like? I see this pattern, this narrative, this archetype as part of our story as well. For those of you who don't know, we were a multi-site campus of a large church down in Carrollton for 5-6 years before we launched into an autonomous church. And in that time, I will say, I do think we kind of identified as the maybe lacking purpose, a little bit aimless as a church. But then something happened. There was a spark, an inciting event that caused an awakening to us. We're like, oh my gosh, we could potentially be called into something more, something bigger. And for us at that time, it was to become an independent, autonomous church. And we prayed about it. And I wouldn't say quite reluctantly, but I would say cautiously, we stepped into that. Do we have the experience? Do we know? Do we have the resources, human, monetary, everything, physical, to step into this? And we did say yes. And then over the last 5 years, what we've done is identified who we are as a church. We've identified our purpose here in the city, what uniquely sets us apart from other churches. And it has been liberating, and it gives us a sense of identity and purpose and mission. And that's what I want us to do, is spend the next 2 weeks, just this week and next week. We're going to be looking at what those things are that are unique about us. Frisco Community Church, that gives us our unique identity and purpose and mission. What's going to happen is some of these are going to sound familiar because they've been vernacular that we've used off and on for the last couple of years. But what's happened, what's different right now, is we've been able to put words to these things about us that are unique. These things that are distinctively different about us. And we're not arrogant about them. It's just who we are. But it helps us step into our identity and know who we are. And they're honestly polarizing. Some of you guys are like, yes, I get this. Because there have been other churches that you visited, other organizations that you visited, you'd be like, I am not cool with that. I'm out. And that's okay if it's not the right fit. But they also draw people in, where it's like, yes, this is the kind of place I want to be a part of. And that's what we're going to be looking at for the next 2 weeks. Today, we're going to look at 2 of them. And next week, we're going to look at 3. And what we're calling these is our ministry mindset as a church. This is our ministry mindset. And again, we have been doing this for years. We finally have words that we're putting to it. It's appropriate, again, at this 5-year juncture to pause and look about who we are and step into that. So our ministry mindset. Now, mindset is a conscious assumption, expectation, or belief. It's a conscious assumption, expectation, or belief that helps us minister to people and navigate challenges. It's how we minister to people and how we navigate challenges. It gives us this sense of direction, purpose, and mission. It's one thing and something that we can all rally around. So as we look at these 2, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the mindset. I'm going to share with you a little bit about it, but then we're going to look at scripture, where we see this unfold in the Bible, in the Gospels specifically, to show that this isn't just us, it's the church. It's what Jesus has called believers to do. So the first thing that I want you to do is take your Bibles. You can turn or navigate to John. You can go to the Gospel of John. That's where we're going to be. We're going to start off in John chapter 8 and then wind up in 4 if you want to bookmark it. And while you're doing that, I want to explain the first mindset, if you will, ministry mindset. It's how we think as a church. And if you've been around for a few months, you've heard this since we did our Gray series a couple months ago. The way we think is gray is okay. Gray is okay. Some of these I may read a little bit more than I normally do because I want to make sure I say it right. I don't want to misspeak and use a different word and get off the rails a little bit. But we believe that not every issue fits neatly into a box, a black box or a white box. It's not binary. It's not yes or no. It's not right or wrong. Not every issue fits there. We do, of course, believe that the historical truths of Christian orthodoxy are worth standing on and defending. We, of course, do. But we also recognize that many theological, cultural conversations arise that don't fit in these boxes. They require humility, they require wisdom, and they require a genuine desire to continue growing and learning in order for us to process them and to go through them. It means that sometimes some difficult questions come up, very difficult questions. And that's good because Jesus was not afraid of difficult questions, and neither are we. We are not afraid of difficult questions here. What I want us to do is look at one of the most difficult questions Jesus ever faced and had to answer. And again, you see this in John chapter 8. John chapter 8, verse 4. Jesus was teaching in the temple courts. He was in the church, if you will, out in the lobby, okay? So that's basically the setting for him 2,000 years ago. He's in the temple courts, and he's preaching, and he's teaching. And there's a crowd of people around him listening to him. And so in the midst of that, the religious leaders of the day in Jerusalem bring a woman to him, and they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery." Caught in the act of adultery. And the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? Teacher, Jesus, what do you say? Now, it's important to note that these scholars, these religious leaders, they know what they're talking about. They're pulling from 2 very specific verses in the Old Testament, in Leviticus 20 and Deuteronomy 22, where it says, yes, this is what the punishment would be for adultery. It's black and white. It's an open shut case, closed deal. Simple, right? It's black and white. This is what you have to do. But how did Jesus respond? He waited. He knelt down in the ground. He drew something in the dirt with his hand, and we don't know what it is. Scholars love to speculate. We have no idea. There's no point in speculating. But what we do know is he didn't answer them directly. And they kept poking and prodding. Teacher, come on. What is the answer? What is the response? And so finally, Jesus had had enough. And it says in verse 7, when they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin throw the first stone." It's a very familiar story. Very familiar story. In fact, I think we've talked about it recently, but it is so important because this is a situation where it just seems clearly, plainly black and white. Complete, like there's just no point for a trial. There's no need for a judge, no need for a jury. It is open and shut. It is black and white. This is what the law says. And it was an impossible question for Jesus to answer. Impossible. Because if he answered with too much compassion, he was a heretic and did not uphold the law of Moses. Okay? But if he answered to the letter of the law, this woman who had been entrapped, yes, entrapped, okay? First of all, did they bring the man caught in adultery? No. Was she caught post-coitus after the affair? No, it was in the act. She was entrapped. What was going on with her was incredibly unfair by the religious leaders of the day who were doing nothing other than using her as a pawn to try to trap Jesus. And so if he responds to the letter of the law, her life is gone in a gruesome way to die. But what did Jesus do? What did Jesus do? He responds with grace and wisdom and completely diffuses the situation. And in doing so, he honored the dignity of everyone involved. Yes, dignity of everyone, even the men, the teachers of the law, the older men who were in the crowd and the mob and the younger men. Why? Because they too were violating God's law, because they were providing false witness. And if Jesus would have called that out and condemned them, which he could have, you're condemned, you're all condemned. That's what he could have done. That's what he could have, but it's not what he did. These teachers of the law would have been shamed because they were breaking God's law. And instead, Jesus responded with wisdom and grace and diffuses the situation. He could have written every single one of them off, but he didn't. Our ministry mindset shapes our decisions, how we minister to people, and how we navigate challenges. Life is full of dilemmas, right? Full of dilemmas. And this was one that was just put in front of Jesus. And what we want, especially in our TikTok world, is a quick anecdote. We want a short answer that will take care of everything, that's easy and simple. But that's not the way life works. That is not the way life works. And those short and simple answers often fall short and sometimes do more damage than they actually do any good. It doesn't scratch the itch. Instead, it just kind of makes the itch worse and worse and worse, makes it a little bit more infected. We've all experienced this with these trite comments, dismissive anecdotes. And instead of rushing to judgment at FCC, we choose humility over arrogance, conversation over condemnation. We choose love over polarization. When we disagree on issues that aren't central to the gospel, we choose grace over division. We seek understanding over justification, and we refuse to write people off. We refuse to write people off. Now, I'll tell you, this is not the most popular ministry mindset. It is not. And it's not easy. It is hard. We talk about this at the elder level, and I am so proud of our elders. We say this regularly. It would be much easier if this were a black and white situation, but it's not. And we have to look at everything in a case-by-case situation, just like Jesus did with this situation. It's longer. It takes more effort. And it is much more difficult. Because we would love to have these categories where we're just like, boom, done with them. Boom, done with them. But that's not what Jesus did. And so that's not what we do. Living in the gray is often where love requires the most courage. Living in the gray is often where love requires the most courage, because you're frequently going to find yourself going countercultural to what somebody else expects. When we accept this and we embrace people as Jesus did, we can confidently be unapologetic about our commitment to love people well in the gray. So a few keys, things to think about to see, are you creeping? Are you living in the gray? Are you creeping out? Are you getting a little black and white? Are you getting a little too rigid? Just a few questions to consider. The first one, and I went over these just a minute ago as a list, but are you choosing grace over division? Are you choosing grace over division? Look, sometimes there are going to be topics that come up where we need to break fellowship over. But the items on that page of paper need to be very, very, very few. Very few. They need to be core to Christian doctrine, core to the gospel. Are you choosing grace over division? The next thing to think about is, are you seeking understanding of the other person's situation or justification of your point of view? What are you doing? Are you trying to understand somebody else's experience, grow in your love for them, have empathy for their experience, maybe even identify a shared experience? Or are you just trying to justify what you think and what you believe and what you hold dear? Are you trying to understand or are you trying to justify? I just want to let you know, it's not sinful to get to know somebody's story. It's not. It's okay to sit down with people who have had really difficult pasts and hear their story and listen and speak love into it and point them to Jesus. The third thing that I want you to consider is, are you writing them off? Are you being dismissive? Oh, they're just some socialist Democrat. They're just this ridiculous MAGA crony. We tend to do that. Let's not do it. Oh, but they had this problem. They have this addiction. Oh, do you realize how much debt that they're in? No, we don't write them off. If you catch yourself writing people off, that's an indication that you are living in those margins, black and white, and not in the gray. Are you choosing grace over division? Are you seeking understanding over justification? Are you writing people off? When we disagree on issues that are not central to the gospel, we choose grace over division, understanding over justification, and we refuse to write people off. Black and white answers are so easy. They're easy, they're simple, and they just allow us to move on and not worry about the collateral damage. It's not the way ministry is done. It's not the way Jesus did it. It's often, though, where our love looks the most like Jesus. So the first thing is how we think. Gray is okay. The second one that I want to go over is how we receive people. How we receive people. This is probably my favorite thing about Frisco Community Church, because when I get to meet new people who have come in and decided to put down roots, or family members who have visited and maybe come back every now and then for a holiday, I hear this over and over and over again. I feel so welcomed. I feel so loved by everyone I encounter. And the way that we receive people at Frisco Community Church is that we are unapologetically welcoming. We refuse to let people feel like they have to believe before they belong. We refuse to let people feel like they have to believe before they belong. This is the way Jesus brought people into his fold. And we do this because God created all of humanity, all people in his image, and all of us have been offered through Jesus the opportunity to participate in the transformed life that we have by accepting him as our Savior. Every single one of us, this gift is open to everyone. And it's not contingent upon your spiritual resume or my spiritual resume. It's not. It's rooted in the fact that everyone is created in God's image, and that everyone is to be treated with the dignity accorded to anyone created in God's image and treated with the basic rights. Many of you have experienced this in churches, unfortunately. The opposite of unapologetically welcoming. I have a friend who was on staff at a church years and years ago, and he had a past with drugs. He was not presently using, but he shared with his life group one time that this was his past. And that was on a Saturday night at their life group. On Monday, he got called into the senior pastor's office and he was fired because he had a past of smoking weed. Never mind the transformation that Jesus had done after that. I understand that's a little bit of a difficult example. He was on staff, et cetera, but you get the point. We have all experienced that. We've all experienced similar situations. Jesus didn't wait for people to get their lives together before inviting them into his community. He didn't. There are so many examples. I could use the tax collectors. I could use Nicodemus. I could use the centurion. There's so many examples of Jesus in Scripture, but I want to go again to one of my favorite that also involves another woman. See, Jesus is walking through, he's well into his ministry, and he's walking with his disciples up to Galilee. And typically to go to Galilee from where they were in Judea, they would go all the way around over here and avoid this spot called Samaria. Have any of y'all ever done a road trip and you're like, maybe we ought to avoid East St. Louis. Oh, maybe West Memphis is not the best place. Let's just take the loop around, right? Okay. Jesus is like, nah, we're going straight through the hood. That's what he's saying. We're going into Samaria. In fact, the text says he had to go there. And he took his disciples into Samaria. They get into this town. The disciples are like, we're going to go get some food. And Jesus is like, I'm going to chill out here by the well. Okay. And the well was on the outside of town. And while he's sitting there, he has an encounter with a woman. John chapter 4, verse 7. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. This is one of the biggest understatements in all of Scripture. Jews hated Samaritans. They did not back then even consider them fully human. They considered them half-breeds. They were the byproduct of Israel violating God's covenant and intermarrying with other Gentile tribes. They did not associate. They hated each other. We do not, in the 21st century, have anything remotely close to what it was like for them a couple thousand years ago in America. We simply don't. The closest I could get would be some kind of tribal backlash in probably Uganda or Rwanda. That's how bad it was. The Civil War, nothing compared to this. Civil rights, nothing compared to this. And so in this, Jesus has a conversation with this woman, and they talk about a lot of things. They talk about her life, but they have a theological debate. She's wrong on something. And Jesus talks to her about this. Their argument was namely on where the appropriate place to worship was, because the Samaritans also kind of worshiped God, not exactly the way that they were outlined in the Old Testament. But that is what the conversation was about. They were having a theological conversation where she was a little off on it. And then while they're doing that, just then the disciples returned and were surprised to find him, Jesus, talking with the woman. But no one asked, what do you want? Or what are you talking about with her? And then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? Verse 30, they, the people in the town, came out and made their way toward him, Jesus. Verse 39, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. Now, when you go back and read this story, nowhere does Jesus say, hey, lady, get your act together before you go back and tell everybody about me. He doesn't. They talk about her life. They talk about the theological dispute that she's using to distract him from the very personal conversation about her life, which, by the way, Jesus said, you have had 5 husbands. Have you thought about the loss that this woman has experienced, the pain to go through 5 husbands? I mean, maybe there's some death in there, surely some abandonment. But the way this is typically taught is it's all her fault. There's nothing in the text indicating that at all. Nothing in the text indicating it at all. And the fact that she was at the well midday tells us she had been shunned by even her own community. She was the outcast of outcasts. And Jesus didn't say, hey, lady, go get your act together before you can talk about me. He didn't. She became the first Samaritan missionary. You thought about that? She went and proclaimed the gospel to the Samaritans. And many in that town believed in Jesus because of that woman's testimony. Jesus welcomed her without apology. Being welcomed doesn't mean that we'll always agree. It doesn't mean that we will avoid difficult conversations. Jesus had a couple difficult conversations with her about lifestyle and about theology. It doesn't mean that we are going to redefine or rewrite what Scripture teaches. It doesn't mean that you get to serve in any capacity. If you're going to serve here, especially in our kids' ministry, you have to match the mustard and meet the requirements to serve in our family and kids' ministry. We are very protective of our kids, but it does mean that you will be treated with the dignity you deserve as being an image bearer of God. You are created in the image of God, and you deserve that dignity, and that is why you are welcomed here without apology. We do not expect people to clean themselves up before walking through our doors. That's ridiculous. Did anybody clean themselves up before meeting Jesus? No, I was not cleaned. We don't require that here. We simply invite you to discover what it means to be remade in his image. I also think it's important that this wasn't just Jesus. I love the note that John makes here in verse 27 when he says his disciples returned. This would be scandalous, okay? This would be kind of akin to me being at a bar with a prostitute, okay? That is kind of what this would have been like. But just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with the woman. They were surprised, okay? Like, that just seems a little off, but okay. No one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking with her? Jesus' interaction with this woman would have been extremely taboo. But the culture that he has created was one that welcomed people unapologetically. Unapologetically welcoming means that all are treated with the dignity that comes from bearing God's image. All are treated with the dignity that comes from bearing God's image. That's who we are. The question that I want you to consider as we try to live out this mindset of how we receive people is, what expectations are you adding to people? What expectations are you adding to me, to our kids' pastor? What expectations are you adding to your children? What expectations are you adding to the people in the room, in your group? The ones that maybe you would like to invite, but maybe aren't good enough. What expectations are you adding to people that Jesus didn't add? Another way to think of this is, how are you butting everyone? But do you realize that they had an addiction issue? Yeah, but did you know that they once were divorced? Yeah, but did you know that they have a criminal record? Where are you butting? What expectations are you adding to people? Fill whatever you want in that but blank. If you're thinking it, before you welcome somebody, you are putting expectations on them that Jesus did not. So to recap, our ministry mindset, the first two, is that the gray is okay. The gray is okay here. You don't have to have it all figured out. And we want to help answer whatever questions you have as you are on your journey to getting to know Jesus and experiencing the life transformation that's found in him. You'll find that there's very little that we're going to argue about. But I tell you what, that core doctrine, what's core to the gospel, we're there. The other thing is, we are unapologetically welcoming. This is why we say, no matter your past, no matter your background, you can finish it with me if you know it, no matter where you are in your journey, you are welcome here. We are unapologetically welcoming. And here's the deal. We're only 2 out of 5, 40% through these. We're going to do the next 3 next week. But already there's a sense of direction, of purpose, of mission in this. Because you're like, yeah, that's who we are. That's who I'm being called to be. And it's exciting to say, this is who we are as a church. It's exciting to have words to this, to finally be able to describe to people, this is what I love about this place. And as a matter of fact, this is your homework for the week. I want you to think about this. I want you to pray about this. Who can you invite But you can say, you know what? Have you ever heard of a church where it's okay to have questions? It's okay to not have everything figured out. Would you like to go to a place like that? Because I know of a place like that. Come check it out come kick the tires for a little bit. What about somebody who has been burned and wounded by the church? Somebody who thinks the church is just full of nonsense. Or somebody who has been part of the church forever, followed Jesus forever, but is just wondering if there's a different kind of community that is unapologetically welcoming. I look at the landscape and see, I don't know that the way this place is behaving, this place, it doesn't seem right. It seems maybe not as welcoming as Jesus would have been. Hey, I know a place, Frisco Community Church, that you could come to where no matter your past, your background, where you are in your journey, you're welcome here because they are unapologetically welcoming. I would love you to invite those folks. Next Sunday is going to be great. You can send them a link to this sermon. But next Sunday would be great too, because we're going to talk about the next three. The next three, for whatever it's worth, is how we empower people, how we engage our culture, and how we grow as a church. How we empower people, how we engage culture, and how we grow as a church. I just want to close with a reminder that this is not something that we can do on our own. We cannot do this in our own strength. In our own strength, we wind up like the Pharisees and the teachers of the law that are dragging that entrapped woman out to Jesus. In our own strength, we wind up, butting. We wind up adding expectations to people like that Samaritan woman had all those expectations. We can only do this by the power and strength of Jesus Christ who lives in us. This is what Paul calls the new exchange transformed life, living by the Spirit as opposed to the flesh. So what I would love us to do is close the service, standing up and responding in prayer through song for dependence upon Jesus as we go through this. Please stand.
Thank you for listening today. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel. If you'd like to learn more about Frisco Community Church, please visit friscocc.org. Until next time, may the God of the universe work with you, in you, and through you. Have a blessed day.